This program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be suitable for very young audiences. Parental guidance is advised.
Be advised that the views and opinions of the hosts and guests do not reflect those of the station.
Okay, itong nakaraang linggo, itong pagyao ni former Prime Minister of Singapore, Lee Kwan Yew, which is in our title, it's Lee KY for short, no? Si Lee Kwan Yew ay binigyan ng napakalaking papuri ng maraming bansa, maraming leader ng mundo, ng media, and so on. At dito sa Pilipinas, ako'y nalulungkot na meron namang okay naman, maganda naman na pinupuri si Lee Kwan Yew, ngunit sa kabila naman, iko-kumpara sa mga ibang mga leader tulad ni Marcos at iba pa, no? At lalaitin ang presidente ng Pilipinas dati na napabagsak sa isang people power daw. And so, I want to clarify that also, and we have this opportunity today to talk about leaders of nations. Ano? And the second name there is Ataturk. Fewer Filipinos are familiar with Ataturk. Siya po ay isang leader ng, in fact, father of modern Turkey. Si Ataturk ay naging presidente, pero bago naging presidente ay isang military leader sa Turkey, no, sa bansang Turkey. And hindi naman bago yung tanong. Ano ba ang solusyon sa mga problema ng bayan natin na tila pabagsak ng pabagsak ang bayan natin? Mula sa isang bansa nung dekada 50 na sinasabi pumapangalawa lang sa Japan. And madalas ang conclusion dahil sa liderato. Wala tayong liderato maayos, kulang liderato. Hanap tayo ng hanap, matapos nung EDSA 1, si Cory, nabigo tayo. Si Fidel Ramos, nagka-problema. Si Erap, hindi nagtagal. Pumasok si Gloria. Ay sabi, this will be the change that we need kasi ekonomista, mahusay daw. Ay, ano nang nangyari? After even an extended term, frustrated na naman ang bayan. And then dumating yung 2010 election, sabi, ito, siguro ito. And so on. Si B.S. Aquino. But what has happened by today? He is the least trusted of government leaders. So ito po ang pag-uusapan natin. Ano ba ang sino sa mga nakikita natin o anong ideal liderato para sa bansa natin? And we have invited one of the upcoming political leaders of the nation sa Kongreso po natin, si Ginoong Ace Acedillo, party list congressman of the Magdalo. And so far, in the 2 years now that he has served in the House, wala naman tayong marinig na masama at imbis na ganyan po, maganda naman ang nababalitaan natin sa kanya bilang congressman ng Magdalo party list as well as the other Magdalo party list congressman, Gary Alejano. So, napag-usapan namin before we started our discussion here at the show, kung anong magandang topic. And yun na nga, itong question of leadership. So, let me ask Ace here. First of all, just a short update on your stint so far in Congress. How has it been? What is your level of expectation? How's the frustration in Congress, if there's any?
Well, first of all, Mentong, salamat sa imbitasyon nyo na tayo'y mapunta dito at makapagkaroon ulit ng diskusyon. Doon ho sa tanong nyo kung kumusta ho sa Kongreso, Of course, first thing I'd like to say, Congressman Alejandro and I came in to Congress at a very challenging time. Pagpasok ko namin, nagbabadya pa lang hong pumutok yung iskandalo sa pork barrel. And sabi nga namin, if I may use a term in under the law, no, we came to court with clean hands kasi hindi na ho namin inabutan yung sistema na yan. Yet, we suffer collectively as a current member of the House from the stigma na papaloob at nababalot sa institusyon namin. So, the first challenge that we had to face was to dispel that notion that lahat kami doon ay corrupt. Lahat kami doon ay nakinabang sa pork barrel. Now, I think in short order, we were able to do that because precisely, familiar naman ang taong bayan sa naging kasaysayan ng aming grupo. At siguro all we had to do, Mentong, was to live up to that expectation. So that we did by way of our legislative work, doon ho sa pagtutulak ng mga issue na kailangan hong bigyan ng kasagutan sa pamamagitan either through the committee system or through the plenary kung kailangan nating magsalita. Tayo rin ay nagpapaunlak doon sa mga pagkakataon kung saan may palitan ho ng kuro-kuro na pwede tayong makapagbigay ng ating punto de vista di lamang bilang isang miyembro ng Kongreso, kundi isang at-heart reformista.
Well, it's a good point to start with, itong pork barrel. And I think it was a result also. It takes two to tango. If there has been problems with the pork barrel over the past decades, going back to the Commonwealth period, dahil when I wrote about it, nag-quote nga ako doon sa isang speech ni Congressman Sumulong noon, or Assemblyman Sumulong, lambasting the pork barrel. So it's been that long. It's the same issue in the United States, ganyan din sa South Korea, and so on. No? But I think after that, in my personal experience, and I had helped some farmers bring some proposals for the so-called pork barrel funds for them, for their projects, water projects, road projects, and so on. Lahat na antala the past 2 years, walang nangyari. Ano? And then people who raise the pork barrel issue don't understand that it has direly affected a lot of projects.
Yes.
Because of their generalization.
Yes.
Alam naman natin dyan sa social media, maraming nagpuputakti ng mga issues na hindi naman naintindihan din yung mas malalim na mga mahalagang realities. Ano? And so I want to stress that the pork barrel anti-pork barrel campaign was driven by social media.
Yes.
So there was no in-depth discussion of what is the alternative. Kasi ang alternative lang is to give it to the executive branch, which is totally lacking also in both the orientation, grassroots attitude,
Yes.
Mga bureaucrats who spend more of their time in air-conditioned office meeting rather than in the field.
Correct.
Samantalang ang mga kongresista, pinupuntahan ng tao, doon nagreklamo.
Kababad sa distrito.
Now, of course, humahaba ang aking reaksyon kasi this is an important part of our history na baka malimutan ng iba na pinagmamalaki ng iba, na natalo nilang pork barrel and so on, but there was no alternative to make things more efficient. Okay, let's move on. Again, the problem with all these issues is that the national leadership has failed, to communicate a lot of matters effectively with the public. So we go back to the question of leadership. But let's move forward faster. Itong Lee Kwan Yew, miracle worker daw sa Singapore and so on. What is your? I'll give my views a little later on.
Okay.
What are your views?
Okay, magandang tanong yan, Mentong. I have both read up on Lee Kwan Yew and spoke to both Singaporeans and some Filipinos who have worked in Singapore. Of course, over the years, more and more that there are mixed views on the legacy of Lee Kwan Yew because that is now what we should be talking about. Not just a body of work, but now a legacy because the man has passed on. Now, ang unang tanong ko sa sarili ko, what were the challenges that he confronted when Singapore broke away from Malaysia? Of course, Singapore then had a majority Chinese ethnic population with a mix of Malay and Indian. So they had basically three ethnicities trying to work with each other towards the goal of nationhood. Pangalawa, it was still a backwater at that time in that part of the world, and it is not yet the favorite port of call and financial center that it is now. So basically, you could boil down the challenges confronting Lee Kuan Yew into two: how to unite these three ethnicities, and second, how to convert the backwater into an economic engine of growth. So in that sense, Lee Kuan Yew succeeded. But then again, if we are to venture out of Singapore and try to make comparisons of the scale of his achievements vis-a-vis the scale of effort of other leaders, I think the comparison now becomes unfair.
Yeah. Let me add to that from my own studies of Lee Kuan Yew. I really am dismayed that so many have not really, so many who adulate him, especially in my fellow writers in Philippine media, they adulate him, but they don't know. They don't try to see the other side that may present a less illustrious image.
Yes.
You know? For example, you mentioned Singapore as backwater. I researched that sa economics history. And Singapore in 1959, when it declared independence from the Federation of Malaysia, was already the third most progressive economy in Asia, second only to Hong Kong and Japan. Hong Kong and Japan. So I was surprised to find out that the Philippines was not even second to Japan already by 59. You know? But that's not surprising because we're such a bigger country, you know, with more population. So, yung pinapalabas ng iba na sobrang depressed ang Singapore when it started as an independent state is only a half-truth. Because the rest of Asia was backwaters pa rin. Eh.
Yeah.
Ano? So, when they describe it as backwaters, madaling tanggapin. But in comparison to other countries, it was already
relatively well
up
off.
there.
Yes,
It was already up there. Number two, si Lee Kuan Yew jailed two of his partners without charge until, I think, almost until their death, you know, without saying that they were tortured or anything, but house arrest and so on. But these were more progressive individuals, no? Associated with the Socialist Party, Communist Party, the labor unions, and so on. So that is the darker part of the Lee Kuan Yew rise to power and consolidation. But how could he do that? Because what he had jailed, the people he jailed were socialists and communists. But who helped build the People's Action Party? You know? So may power struggle din dyan, pero hindi napapag-usapan yung part of that history. And because he was British educated, and itong mga nabiktima niya ay komunista o sosyalista or leftist and so on, this is not mentioned. Because the West essentially likes Lee Kuan Yew. He is their ideal, a capitalist in many ways.
The model of what we would call a benevolent dictator.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, sasabihin ng mga iba, hindi, kinakalaban din naman yung mga kano and so on on minor issues, but not on issues of real sovereignty. Because ang often comparison is, although dictator si Lee Kuan Yew, bakit successful siya? Hindi siya corrupt kasi, and so on and so forth. Bakit si Marcos at si Suharto bumagsak? Well, si Marcos pinabagsak ng various forces because he was standing against the local Philippine oligarchs who were allied to the West. He cut the U.S. basis agreement from 99 years to 25 years. He tried to industrialize the Philippines, which would mean the loss of the market of the U.S. and the Western interests in the Philippines, and so on. So it is much more complicated for a country that is now 100 million compared to one that is maybe 5, 6 million. I don't know In Suharto's case, that's another matter. Suharto, at the time when he was deposed, was building a strong Indonesian Navy. And I remember one critical factor was when Indonesia bought military hardware, I think a naval cruiser or something, from Ukraine. So, sa Singapore and Lee Kuan Yew never had to deal with these things. So, but you, yeah, go ahead. You wanted to
if I may interject a comment now, no? One thing I see which I think is crucial, if a country like Singapore, as small as it is, and as less the challenges as there are compared to even a medium-sized country like the Philippines, it had the luxury, of course, of talking about a 60-year plan. And that is only possible because you had a long-serving, founding Prime Minister at the helm for so long, for several decades, in fact. The only time we had that sort of an exercise was, of course, when Marcos was at the helm, and even that failed, no? But let us look at the constitutional limitations of a Philippine presidency. We could not even talk about a 10-year plan because the longest that, outside of Marcos, the longest any Philippine president has served was either a 2-year, 8-year, two-year, two-term, 8-year stint, or a single-term, 6-year stint.
Right.
Now, how in the world can you talk about long-term policies that when we know, in fact, that the rule of the game is pag bago nakaupo, bago lahat ng polisiya. Now, we never had the benefit of a long-term view or a long-term strategy in terms of pursuing national development. And during the time when Goh Chok Tong was the Prime Minister, Singapore was able to look back and say, how have we done in our, at that time, 50-year plan? Precisely, they could do that because someone else was at the helm for...
But at the same time, it's now this juncture, important to point out that Lee Kuan Yew represented not himself,
Yes.
but a party.
Yes.
At yung partido, tuloy-tuloy kahit nagpapalit yung Prime Minister.
Yes.
The party was in power. It's like China.
Yeah.
China is the Communist Party of China. For 60 years, it built up China. Nagpapalit every 10, 15 years,
Yes, 10 years,
ang leadership. After Deng Xiaoping, nagkaroon na ng regular succession.
But there is
Pero yung
continuity
programa,
of policy,
tuloy-tuloy.
yes, because it is because there is one dominant party. Now, let's talk about that single dominant party. Of course, we know the price that comes with propping up a single party in a country, and that includes cracking down on a lot of freedoms which we otherwise enjoy here in the Philippines. For example, if there is an assembly of 3 or more, illegal ho yun sa Singapore. There is virtually no freedom of the press and freedom of speech. There are, of course, advantages when it comes to a strong one-party rule, and that is, of course, they're able to implement economic policies which are virtually unquestioned. Dito, despite the best intentions of our best economic advisors, that is subject to debate and subject to question.
Yung ang problema dito sa so-called electoral democracy, it benefits parties and factions who want to seize power, or individuals and big interests, because they can manipulate kung sinong kanilang ilalagay bilang leader ng bayan. But the country itself suffers from lack of development, lack of direction, and so on. So let's now go to because the purpose of our discussion today is to define what qualities our leaders in the Philippines require, or the ultimate leader.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned, that's why we examined Lee Kuan Yew. Bagay ba sa Pilipinas sa Lee Kuan Yew? Palagay ko hindi. It'll take more time to discuss that. But you also mentioned one of the ideals from your background as a military man is Ataturk of Turkey. Why Ataturk?
Well, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, of course, had a strictly military background. As a young man, he was sent to the equivalent of their military academy in Turkey, and he fought. He earned his spurs in battle, but he was also at that crucial moment in Turkish history that he was able to intervene with a group of young officers to shape what will become the history of Turkey after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, after the end of World War I. Now, he came along at the right time, virtually seen as a savior of his country. But what I think sustained Ataturk and what defined his legacy was his ability to convert Turkey into a secular democracy. And this he did by, building from the ground up, building from the ashes, so to speak, of World War I. He instituted a new alphabet. He championed that a single language be spoken. He introduced economic reforms, reforms in the education sector, and so on and so forth. And you have the good interplay of the resoluteness of a military commander with the sound management skills of a educated man. He was actually a very well-read person also. By all accounts, he was what we would call a warrior, philosopher warrior, as well as a warrior diplomat. So I think given those qualities, plus the fact that the abiding goodwill of his people allowed him to stay in office long enough to see through these reforms. In fact, at the time of his death, he was ready to hand over the reins of power. But however, that was not to be, because his demise was considered untimely. Yet we also have here the qualities of a man who saw to it that when the time came, he would be the one responsible to ensure the smooth transition of power, which I think will differentiate him from a dictator, benevolent or not.
Yeah, now we have to accelerate. Every time we have a discussion, nagkukulang ng oras na akala ko sapat na, no? But let me again fast forward. I can see only two groups in Congress today that have the qualities of determination, a certain either political or even military warrior background, vision, a very clear vision. And that is the Magdalo. And on the other side of the fence, it's the Makabayan Coalition. Disciplined, cooperative ang mga different groups nila. Well, the Makabayan Coalition, that's another matter. But in the case of Magdalo, the qualities are there. And I want to link it to the question people have about Sonny Trillanes, for example, saying that it's not the time. The times are not ripe for a Trillanes bid for the presidency. What does he mean by that?
Well, if I understood it correctly, Mentong, the perception really, and it's a problem of perception, is that he's too young. And based on that fact alone, they have glossed over many of his qualities.
I wonder if you recall si Ataturk and the young Turks that he had.
Yes.
Young nga, bata nga sila.
He was a lieutenant colonel. When I would put his age somewhere between late 30s to early 40s. And that's pretty young by the standards of most world leaders. Pero going back to the discussion with Senator Trillanes and the Magdalo, of course, I don't like to be seen as being totally biased, but what I'm merely saying, Mentong, from my school of thought is that because precisely of the geostrategic location of the Philippines, the forces in play, we are fighting multiple fronts internally. We are faced with a grave external security threat. First and foremost, whatever inroads you have had economically, socially, culturally, they will always be undermined by threats to national security, both in soil and from abroad. So this, it goes without saying that the challenge ultimately that will confront any Philippine president is a security one, is of a security nature. Therefore, his ability to manage crisis and to have what we would call a wartime leadership ability would always come into play.
Okay. Well, we have run out of time actually. Again, I think we finally have to reschedule a full show
Yes.
just on the question of leadership that the Republic of the Philippines requires. Ano? So, last 30 seconds, aamutin ko kay Rachel. 30 seconds, your message.
Well, of course, we have always asked ourselves, what kind of leader does the Philippines deserve? And so far, we have been, our history books have been littered with bad to poor leadership after another. So what I'm really saying here is, Mentong, the sad part here is that we really deserve the leaders that we elect. Because in the end, it was our choice, but there are other forces at play, and we need to influence those forces if we are to make a good choice.
Okay, maraming salamat, Congressman.
Thank you.
Talagang kailangan ulitin natin ito. So, maraming salamat, but hold on for the second part of our episode today.